Hi, hello, it's me, Unkempt Snugglepepper, back for not another episode of Art Critiques. In fact, this time we're looking at my own artwork. This is my webcomic, Fortune's Fancy, and we're going to go through and add all the shadows. So Fortune's Fancy is my webcomic about Drexel, who is the most powerful wizard of his time, but 23 years ago he destroyed the city of Resultum, and he never got past that guilt. So in present day, in the webcomic, he has an apprentice, Mira, and they find a handsome fortune teller named Archimedes. The overarching plotline of the comic is that Drexel has a lot of PTSD and anxiety surrounding those events, and by interacting with Mira and Archimedes, he is able to realize that other people love him and he's able to love himself. I think the idea that you have to love yourself first is kind of BS. I draw from a lot of personal points that throughout my life, sometimes I didn't love myself, but because someone else was there, slowly but surely I learned that I was worth it. It is worth it to do things for yourself. I also try to avoid the trope that by loving someone they will heal from their trauma. That is also not necessarily true. It takes a lot of time to work through those sort of things. But anyway, in this episode, Archimedes is flirting with Drexel. Drexel totally doesn't take the hint, and so Mira has to play wingman. So far, it's been a really fun webcomic to draw and to experiment with. Not only do I have the fun and joy of drawing different facial expressions and different characters, but because it also has a fantasy element, and Drexel and Mira are wizards, sorcerers, sorceresses, and Archimedes has some magic, I get to draw magical effects as well. So for this, I am using Clip Studio Paint EX version 2. Version 2 has a few cool features, one of which is an automatic shading feature that I haven't played with, and an ability to use your hand in front of a camera and it'll change the hand model that you have pulled up on screen. I also have not played with that yet. I have the EX version because Clip Studio Paint is made for comics. It was originally Manga Studio. And the EX version allows for that little window of comic pages. There's also a lot of tools that make webcomic creation easier in Clip Studio Paint compared to something like Photoshop or Krita. For example, there's a panel creating tool, there are speech bubble and text tools that are more expansive than other painting programs. So I've really enjoyed learning that portion of Clip Studio Paint. Of course, if you are a digital artist and you are just looking for a digital art program, the pro version will get you some digital painting, all of the goodies there. I believe the biggest difference between Pro and EX is the panel for comics as well as an increased time for animation. So what tools do I use in Clip Studio? For most of this, I am using the pen tool to outline where I want to put the shadow. I am also using the magic wand tool that will select color and stop at the lines because I have it set to multiple layers. This is really helpful, for example, when I am on Drexel's face, I can select his face and neck, put the shadow in there, and not have to worry about going over the line into his hair. I also use the fill bucket tool to fill in large spaces. And I use the turnip pen, which is one of the standard pens that come with the program. Something that I like about Clip Studio compared to, say, Procreate is that you can have auto actions, and with those auto actions, they can record multiple steps. So I have one that is set up specifically for shading that will lower the opacity to 50%. I have one for backgrounds where it will expand the selected area so that when I blur it, it doesn't have weird white edges. In addition to that, in a single click, I can expand the area, do a Gaussian blur at 40%, and then deselect the area. Actually, it's two clicks, because I also have to click OK on the Gaussian blur, but it's already set to 40, which is where I usually put it in my blur. I talk a lot about using cell shading, and when I'm actually making my webcomic probably isn't the absolute best example, because in my webcomic, since I'm drawing the characters over and over, I don't put in as many shadow shapes or as many details. For example, under Drexel's nose, sometimes I'll put a shadow there, but usually I don't. Partly because, again, I'm drawing the same thing over and over. It's a little difficult to include every minute shadow shape. If I were painting, when I go in after the flat color, then I'll add the shadow shape under the nose or in the eye socket or a few more details. I discovered while making the Super Bowl extra for Fortune's Fancy that I can use a purple layer and then lower the opacity to about 50%. But I found that with Drexel, I had to make it lighter since he's so dosh gone pale. So he uses the medium tone purple for him and his robes. Archimedes also uses it. A lot of Mira's clothing are pastels, so they use it. And then for Mira's flesh tone, for some of the darker clothing, I use a medium purple, and then I have one last purple that is very close to black that I use to shade Mira's hair since it is so much darker. At this point, I try to give sparkles every time Archimedes flirts, but then I realize he flirts quite a bit and I decide not to add them. So, if you want to read my webcomic Fortune's Fancy, it's linked down in the doobly-doo. I also have Buy Me a Coffee, as well as a form link where you can submit your art to be on the next art critique episode.